Hi, I'm Adam McNamara and welcome to another episode of Taking The Reins, brought to you by the Professional Jockeys Association and Sporting Life. In this episode, I'm joined by Patrick Mullins and we talk about life at Willie Mullins, jockey psychology and dynamics, the Cheltenham Festival, that incident with Danny Mullins and Harry Potter.
There was a lot of stupid, a lot of bleeps, F's and B's and C's and whatever.
Back in focus in full flight, he's going to swing right by and jump his rival, who was caught unawares.
You know, working with your family isn't always straightforward. Like, we will clash at times. Willie changes his mind. He'll say one thing, do another thing, and drives me crazy.
It's Patrick and Willie Mullins again in the Guinness Gold Medal.
There's different falls and different things go wrong, but yeah, as long as you are right and the horse is all right, you live to fight another day.
So what I'm really interested to know, because obviously we'll get into your racing career and your passion and everything like that. What I want to know is, what do you do outside racing? Is there hobbies? Is there something that you do to take your mind off the game?
Well, I live with Brian Hayes, Rachel Blackmore. The three of us share a house. So look, we watch a bit of TV, do all my stuff. I read a lot, preferably stuff with dragons, Game of Thrones, The Wheel of Time, Harry Potter, that kind of stuff. But I'd always have a book at the side of my bed, and I write as a hobby. I do a bit of writing and I really enjoy that. English was the only subject I got an A1 in my leaving cert. I had a really good teacher called Mr. Wallace, and I really enjoy writing. It's kind of like a puzzle, you know, trying to put the words in the right positions, the sentences in the right positions, the paragraphs, trying to click them all together, trying to get them to fit and flow. And that's something I enjoy doing on my downtime. Yeah.
I think that's pretty unusual for a jockey, I think, to be that focused on sort of literature. And so where did your inspiration from that come? Was that just through your youth, or how did it happen? Yeah,
I've always enjoyed reading. We would have started off the Sheltie books, which are, I don't know if you have them over here, but they were like pony books. And would have loved reading about the history of racing, like, you know, Grand National winners, Old World Cup winners, like, would love reading about the history of racing. But mostly what I like to read is kind of fantasy stuff, which isn't everyone's cup of tea, but I don't know. Yeah, my mum and dad read a bit, but it's just something I've always liked.
Yeah, and then, so you mentioned Game of Thrones and Harry Potter, and I was a big Harry Potter fan when I was a kid, read all the books. And I found when I then watched the movies, it sort of lacks something. It's a bit irritating to watch. And definitely with Game of Thrones, that last series, I don't know if you've seen it, but they absolutely butchered it. Is that something you find difficult now when you read the books, obviously, and then you're an avid writer? Does it irritate you watching it on screen?
Yeah, it's very hard. It's very hard to do. Like, the only thing I think that the Lord of the Rings films are actually as good as the books, which it shouldn't be able to do, but they were fantastic. Whereas the Hobbit ones was so bad. The Hobbit was so annoying. I was a big Harry Potter fan too. I queued at 12 o'clock to get the book. Didn't wear the cape and hat or anything, but I did queue. I prefer reading the books than watching the films. Yeah.
And then because obviously you mentioned you do a bit of writing, and I've read some of your stuff, and I think it's very good stuff. Again, for a jockey, probably unusual that you've got that sort of skill set. So do you take inspiration from the fantasy and almost try and transfer that into your writing, or do you feel like you've got your own specific style that you try and stick to?
A bit of that. I like reading that. I like reading a lot of old sports writers. So I love reading the American boxing writers from like 30s and the 40s and 50s are brilliant, and probably take a lot of inspiration from American sports writers and even Gay Talese. His style would have been, I think, new journalism, which is you write real life as if it's fiction. And I enjoy that, trying to make, you know, something you say, me going to the Melbourne Cup or something, writing as if it's a story. I like trying to write maybe a little bit differently to have, your own style or something. But I would take a lot of inspiration from reading a lot of American sports writers, yeah.
I think that makes it interesting then for the reader when they're reading it through. If you put it in sort of like a story format, it makes it more interesting for people to engage with, I suppose, doesn't it?
Definitely. And also, like, I try to be honest in it. I think honesty is. I'm pretty lucky because I'm working for my family as opposed to maybe working for a boss. I can maybe be a bit more honest. But I think honesty comes through. And a friend of mine also said, like, the bad days are actually more interesting. So, and I was looking at some of the stuff I've written the last year, and a lot of it is actually when stuff goes wrong, I think I need to be more positive. But it's actually easier to write about, and more interesting when I was writing about when stuff goes wrong and how you deal with that or how you feel about it. Whereas the good days are maybe not quite as interesting.
Why do you think that is? Do you think it's because, I'd assume it's because people just can relate to the bad days a bit more. Is that what you think it is, or why do people sort of tie into that?
I think everyone would rate the bad days, and there's probably, I would find myself, there's actually more emotion in when things go wrong. Like you know, a good day is, you're like, right, the relief, job done. Whereas when things go wrong, you can be quite introspective, and I think emotion comes true. I think actually the stronger emotions are in the bad days.
So there's more like depth of emotion there, and people feel that more profoundly, I suppose.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's talk about your youth a little bit more. Then, obviously, you mentioned avid reader and writer, but one would assume from your early days it was a given that you'd end up sort of taking the rough path that you have taken. Was it always going to be, I'm going to be a jockey, or was there ever a point you were going to be a writer or do something different?
No, I wasn't always going to be a jockey. I grew up with Roy Keane, Dennis Irwin, wanted to play soccer for Man United, and went and did they had a training camp in Waterford 2 years. Went down there 2 years, never got picked. But I was under 11 player of the year for Thomastown United, so that was a proud day, yeah. And then when I went to school, and that was all rugby, so I took up rugby. And like, it was always with the opinion that I was too heavy to pony race, and you know, even when I started writing, Willie was like, you know, you'll get a few years out of this, and you know, you make the most of it because you're going to be too tall and too heavy. So like, I stopped playing rugby in maybe third year, which was when I was 15 or 16 when I was getting my licence, because everyone started bulking up, doing weights, and so I went from being fullback to winger to off the pitch, because everyone was much bigger than me. And it was only really my mid-teens that I was like going to be a jockey. Yeah, I was a failed soccer player.
I think there's probably a lot of young lads who would say they were failed soccer players.
Yeah.
But then, like you said, when Willie said to you early days, you're probably going to get a couple of years out of that. Was that difficult for you to hear as a young prospective jockey, to realise you might only have a limited amount of time to do what you really want to do?
Yes and no. I mean, I never thought I was going to be a professional jockey. My father was an amateur, so you know, I was always thinking I'd be an amateur. And I went to a boarding school, so it was a 7-day boarding school. So you get out on a Sunday after mass, and you're back for a study at 6 o'clock, and you get home one weekend a month. So when I started riding when I was 17, it was very hard to get out for rides. And I remember at the start of the year I was trying to get out, and I was told no. So I went anyway, and the horse won. And of course, I got whatever detention. So I just, for the rest of the year then, I didn't ask. And I used to be sneaking out, and I'd have lads covering for me. So we all had our rooms, and between 6 and 8 you'd be studying. So James McGreevy was beside me. He'd have my English book open, and he'd pop in every now and then and change stuff around, or if someone would look for me, I'd be at the toilet, or I'd be asking a question somewhere. So I got away with it until the very end of the year. I was riding in the Cheltenham Festival, Adam Approach, and he'd finished 4th or 5th, but of course it was on RTE, which is our BBC. And I got back that evening, big 78 of us in the room having a year meeting, and one of the priests walks in, who's into racing. I'm sitting in the front row because I'm late, and he says, "Oh, Paddy, how did you get on in Punchestown today?" So of course our prefect went tonto, so up to the headmaster, parents called in, and in fairness, Willie came in and made the point, look, he's very tall, he's probably not going to have long to do this. Yeah. So we came to an agreement, and I remember meeting the headmaster, Father Maloney, Leonard Maloney, about a week later, and I just said to him, "Geez, thanks very much, we really appreciate that, and it's really sorry about that." He said to me, and I think it's a great bit of advice, he said, "Look," he said, "sometimes it's easier to gain forgiveness than permission." And he just walked off. I just thought, you know, so anyway, it all worked out.
Yeah, so it's a fairly good piece of advice. And do you live by that now?
Yeah, you choose your moments. Yeah. With Willie, definitely choose your moments with Willie with that.
For sure. And then was there, at that point, again, your early point in career, was there a feeling at that stage that, because obviously Willie's so successful, was there a feeling that you had to prove something in your own right?
Yeah, it was a bit different then. Like, Willie wasn't what he is now. I think Cousin Vinny was maybe Willie's 10th or 11th Cheltenham winner. So like, it wasn't like we were going over having 3 or 4, 5 or 6 winners every year. But obviously Willie was champion amateur. He was actually normally second. He'd been champion trainer a couple of years before, but he was normally finishing second in O'Mead in Trainer Championship. But yeah, obviously with the name, my grandfather and everything, I wanted to prove myself. But do I remember that being a huge weight? Not really, no.
So it wasn't ever something that you felt like you had to go out and really make a point. You always felt, I suppose, there's some bit of like self-assuredness, self-confidence there that you are your own man in your own right anyway, and you don't have to prove anything. Yeah,
look, I was lucky. I was lucky that I landed running. I got plenty of winners, and Cousin Vinny was the first Cheltenham winner when I was 18. But yeah, I've always felt I need to keep proving it. I think no matter what I achieve, there's the asterisk of, obviously I'm Willie Mullins' son and Paddy Mullins' grandfather, so I like to keep achieving it, because anything I can achieve, I should achieve. But I don't remember being a weight. I remember being a push, and it is a push rather than a weight, if that makes sense.
Yeah, okay. And do you still feel like that today, that you're still sort of pushing yourself to prove?
Yeah, like if you it's obviously a bit less now, but I know you get a run of bad results, you're definitely, and more so maybe now, trying to ride in the good races and the grade ones, and obviously Paul is number one, but like say myself and Danny and Brian Hayes, Rachel are in behind Sean O'Keefe for the second and third horses, so definitely need to keep proving that you're good enough to ride in those top races. Yeah.
And you mentioned your first Cheltenham winner at 18. What's that feeling like when you hit that line, that emotion when you hit the line as an 18-year-old at Cheltenham? What was that like?
Yeah, I mean, it was the 10th race of the day before had been called off. The winds had been called off for the wind, so there was 10 races. It was pitch dark, and I just remember taking forever to get up the line, over the hill and up the line, and the feeling was, I suppose, a mix of elation, vindication, and relief. The fact that like I said, I didn't know how long I was going to be riding for, so to get a Cheltenham winner on the board was, I'm a jockey. Now, I did try to get in the 21 club later that night by skipping the queue, by saying, I'm Patrick Mullins, the road winner, won today, and the bouncer looked me up and down and said, you're not a jockey, mate, back at the queue. So it didn't last that long, but
back down to earth
very quickly.
Yeah. You mentioned it felt like it took an age to get up the Cheltenham Hill. I think this is something that maybe sort of the average person sitting at home wouldn't really understand. They wouldn't have sat on a horse in a race course. I always felt like, particularly in the bigger races, when you hit the front, it is a bit like, it's not like time slows down, but you feel like the horse is going slower or something. Like it's a shift in your perspective. So is that what you felt at that time, that you hit the front and it was just like slow motion, just let me get there?
Oh yeah, so once you're in the front, all you're waiting for is something to come past you, isn't it? And you just, instead of having something to aim at, you're suddenly aware of what's going to come behind you, and you can't see. So the unknown makes time stretch, I think.
Yeah. And then do you still have that now? Like when you hit the front in a big one at Cheltenham, do you still feel like that, or has it gotten a bit easier over time?
Yeah, I mean, obviously it gets a bit easier over time, but I think if you listen to winning jockeys, they always come in and say, I hit the front too soon. And everyone has that feeling,
Yeah. And the case probably isn't that they actually hit the front too soon, it's that they just felt like they hit the front too soon. It's like time slow down. One thing I'm always very keen to ask jockeys in this podcast is a little bit about horsemanship, and more specifically about your hands. And we've had a lot of flat jockeys on previously, and I think it's probably, because it's a different discipline, there's probably different techniques and ways that you would get a horse to relax. So what are you doing with your hands when you're going around Punchestown, Cheltenham, and you're just trying to get a horse to relax and travel within itself and not overexert? Is there something specific you do, or does it change on each horse, or what is it that you're...
Yeah, it's funny. I don't think I have a great pair of hands, but it's funny as well. Willie's horses travel. So if you ride a horse with Gordon Elliott, if you see Jack Kennedy or Dave Russell, they often ride with their hands on the neck with a loop in the rein. Our horses tend to carry a more. And I actually like, for me, I like having contact with the horse's mouth. Because I used to run a lot as a kid. And I like trying to give the horse the feeling that he can go faster, but I'm asking him not to sort of keep filling his confidence. So let him, as far into a race as I can. I like having a horse. Some people like having a horse more relaxed and having a long rein. I actually always like having contact with the horse, letting them know I'm here, but I'm just keeping you here now, and we can go faster when you want, even though they might not be able to. So I like having contact. I like supporting the horse and telling him that, we can go faster, but I don't want you to until I do.
Until you ask, yeah. So it's almost like a little bit like reverse psychology with the animal to sort of trick him into a bit of self-confidence.
Yeah, that's how I like to ride. But I mean, look, you see, everyone has their own ways of doing it. Other people like a horse to forget that there's even a jockey on their back. But I like to always have the contacts, have the conversation with the horse.
And then you said that Willie's horses just tend to travel. Why do you think that is? Is that something that Willie deliberately does? Does he want them to travel, therefore he trains them specifically to travel, or is there some sort of unknown reason that your horses just travel? Yeah, it's something we've talked about. It's probably also the way we train them. When we do fast work, we train them to quicken.
So for 200 metres, they'll be going around at 70%, 75%, and then you'll get them quicken up to 90. And maybe we just do slightly faster and more faster work than other people. And the horses just seem to travel a bit better. Also, our gallop is very deep, and actually when they get on the grass, it's nearly easier work, so they just feel they can probably go faster a bit easier.
Yeah.
But then Paul Townend gets a lot of them to relax, and maybe it's just me.
Why is it you think that Paul gets them to relax? Is there something that you watch Paul do and think, oh, that's why he's relaxing them, or is it something unknown?
Paul would have came from the flat, so he'd ride a bit shorter. And I think when you ride a bit shorter, you can maybe have more weight forward onto their neck. I think it's just a different style, and I think he just has I think he probably has better balance than I do as well. And yeah, it's just a different style, but probably because I came from amateur riding, he came from pony racing and flat racing, so we balance differently and we have our weight in different places.
And then obviously you'd have grown up with Ruby being a massive involvement in the yard, and his style, I think, is very different to Paul's, and that he would sit probably a little bit further back and have a tighter hold of them. Is that the way you think?
Yeah, I would have tried to copy Ruby. I like riding a bit longer, have my legs wrapped around him. I like having a horse held between my ankles and my hands. Whereas, say flat riders and Paul would probably like to sit more on top of a horse and use their balance and momentum that way. But Ruby, you could see Ruby just holding a horse together. Yeah, rides a bit longer. But again, he came from the amateur ranks.
Yeah. And you mentioned earlier, obviously, Paul being number one, and there's a plethora of you in behind trying to pick up all the best rides in behind. How does that dynamic work? Is there a sort of unspoken competition between you all? I'd assume there's no bitterness or anything, you're all sort of working as a team, but is there a competition? Are you trying to get on horse in front of each other? Is there any behind the scenes tactics?
Yeah, definitely, and you need that. I'm finding you need someone pushing you. You should never be comfortable. You do need someone thinking if I don't go into work today, or if I'm late today, or if I mess up this ride, or I can't do the weight, well, he's going to be in ahead of me. So because obviously I'm riding amateur most of the time, I'm not maybe directly in contact with competition with the likes of Danny and stuff, but for the bigger rides we are. But a lot of it will depend on maybe you might have a relationship with certain owners, you might have had previous success with certain owners. Willie might think my style or Danny's style might suit a horse better, or Sean O'Keefe, and it's at the end of the day it comes down to Willie, so it's basically just trying not to follow Willie.
Yeah.
Yeah, it can be hard at times. Yeah,
I can imagine, yeah. And then when it comes to the actual race itself, because there'll be quite a few races, say at Cheltenham Festival, big meetings where there's 4 or 5 Willie's runners in a race, and you'll be on one and Paul will be on another, Danny on another. How do the tactics work? Are you, for people who again wouldn't really understand trainer jockey sort of conversations, are you working as a team, or are you all working to set tactics, or does it vary for different races? How does that work?
So we literally will talk to Willie probably 5 minutes before the race, and you'll get 30 seconds. Willie is very much, there wouldn't be a 10-minute discussion on what way we're going to ride a horse. Everyone is definitely riding their own race, but at the same time, if we don't want 3 people trying to make the run all at the same time come on each other's throats, so you might say, right, well, that horse is the keenest horse, he has to make the run, so that means Paul or Patrick, you're going to have to second or third. There's someone else might want to make the run and take them on. Or if you have 5 horses in the race and everyone wants to drop in, there's no point all 5 horses being out the back. So, you know, it'll depend on what your opponent's going to do. It'll depend on what way the horses are. Generally, Willie will leave it to you. The odd time he'll have a strong view on what you should do and you know, do that. But he's happy to leave it to us. And at the end of the day, everyone is there trying to win. You know, you've seen it. Danny and Paul, myself and Danny, you know, having in races and keeping someone in or keeping someone out. So it's once the tape goes up, it's every man for himself.
Yeah. So let's talk about Danny then, because you brought it up. That incident earlier in the year where you pulled up and you had a very strong word. Firstly, I want to know exactly what you said to him, because I don't think this has been made public. I want to know word for word what was said.
Well, I can't remember the exact words, but there was a lot of stupid, a lot of bleeps, F's and B's and C's and whatever. But it was actually a road race situation from my point of view. So my horse jumps to his right. I'd warned Danny he jumps to his right, and in my view, if he was beside me at the second last, we could have collided in the air and one of us could have gone down. So it's a bit like if someone cuts across you on a motorway. Now, because Danny's out with my cousin and we get out to each other every week, you know, if it was Jack Henley, he probably wouldn't have been quite as strong. But yeah, when it's family, I was, and Danny's just very cheeky as well. Like, I mean, he was so bold as a kid. He got sent to Jim Boulders to try put some manners into him, and he came up and said something cheeky, and I just
so he initiated it then.
Yeah. So, but you know, like an hour later, it was fine. Yeah. It was, and we got a good laugh out of it anyway.
And I think personally, I thought you got a bit of a hard do in the press about that, because I do think a lot of people wouldn't understand. Like I said, it is like a road rage incident, and in that racing scenario, or even just as you pull up, your blood is up, maximum adrenaline's up to the max. Obviously, you're probably a bit relieved that you've still managed to win the race with that incident that happened and everything like that. So I do think it's a little bit harsh for sort of the outside person to look in and say, oh, Patrick shouldn't be saying stuff like that, and who does he think he is? And yeah. I think it's fair enough.
Yeah, look, I would have a temper, and from when you're down to start to when you're walking off the track afterwards, like I can be quite volatile. But I think that happens in lots of sports. You see every football match, rugby match, you see people getting in one each other's face. It's high adrenaline, it's high octane stuff, and look, yeah, did I overreact? I did. Was there a overreaction to the incident? Yeah, I mean, look, I didn't read a lot of it. I wasn't overly. It was a bit of sport, a bit of laugh, and it was interesting how big it got. And you know, maybe that's. Maybe there was a good side to it as well. I don't know. It was definitely a point of interest. But yeah,
I think you see it a lot in Formula One. I remember a couple of years back, Sebastian Vettel made a point, like a press conference, because they were trying to call Lewis Hamilton out because he called someone a wanker. And Vettel jumped in and was like, it's not fair that you're trying to, put words in our mouths and say that we're all bad people because we're reacting in the moment. But I think again that's a fair point, isn't it? That as athletes and as performers in a high adrenaline situation, I think that's a perfectly fine thing to do. And like you said, probably actually generates interest. So it's probably not a bad thing for the sport, really.
Yeah, like it's actually amazing how polite racing is in a sense. I suppose probably where the complication came was I was so angry even at the interview afterwards. I should have explained myself better. But yeah, look, it was something we're looking back and laughing at anyway. Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit more about Jockey Dynamics, because you're in a fairly unique position in that you're a jockey associate with the yard, and you're also play a big part in the running and sort of management of the yard as well. So firstly, what I want to know is, obviously a big personality like Ruby, who rode as many Cheltenham winners as he did and was loved by the public and was probably one of the best we've ever seen. That transition then to Paul, who's obviously still a fantastic talent and one of the best we've ever seen. How difficult is that as a yard? Was it a difficult transition period, or was Paul just seamlessly stepped in, or has there been a big change that you've noticed in the dynamic?
No, so we were very lucky that Paul was there for 7 or 8 years beforehand, so he just slotted straight in. Now, it would have been very different if we had Harry Goblin come over or something like that. Ruby would have been more, I would say, involved in the yard, but that's Ruby's personality. Like, he's more outgoing. Paul is very quiet, and so they would have a different way of doing their business at home in the yard. But I mean, from a results point of view, I think Ruby's the best of all time. But from a results point of view, Paul has more than matched what he was doing with our horses. Yeah.
Yeah. And then, is it something that you or Willie ever think about? Because you see it in football or Formula 1 or other sports where the sort of manager team principal seem very conscious of their athletes' psychology and how they manage them as people. I get the feeling that in racing that doesn't happen as much, and trainers probably aren't as conscious of trying to work out the psychology of their riders in order to enhance performance. And that's a pretty broad statement. I could be wrong, but that's the general feeling I get. Is it something you and Willie think of? Is managing personalities and their psychology something that you work on and try and manipulate to get the best results?
I think we've been lucky that both riders are quite straightforward. If you could have a rider who needs more. I think the biggest thing is confidence. So Willie might give you a bollock after race straight away, but it's done. It doesn't carry on. And I think, confidence is the big thing. Is that a major part of what Willie thinks with jockeys? I don't think it is. But like I said, I think the riders we have, we haven't needed to. Whereas with other people you might. I mean, Paul Carey would have been interesting to manage, I would have thought.
Yeah. Why do you think that is, that racing as a whole doesn't really look into that? Do you think it's just because we're a little bit behind the times? Is it something that you think we should look into a bit more?
I think from a sporting point of view, we're definitely way behind maybe where other sports are. It's definitely something that could help, but I suppose, like I said, we've just been lucky that our jockeys have been quite straightforward, so it hasn't been a major issue for us as of yet, anyway.
Okay. And then, do you have a part to play in, say, in races where you may not be riding? Do you have a part to play in jockey selections? Do you have a word in Willie's ear and say, I think Paul suits this one better, or Danny suits this one better?
From time to time, but mostly Willie make his own mind up. I'd be, I might say, Danny would be quite a forward rider, forceful rider. So if you have a lazy horse, he might suit him better. Or maybe if you have a real keen horse, it might suit someone, a different type of rider. Brian Hayes, we would often a horse that maybe lacks a bit of confidence jumping. Brian is very good at that way. So different riders, different strengths, and you match them with different horses.
Mm-hmm. And then more about the home life. So that dynamic between you and Willie, again, as father and son and trainer and sort of assistant trainer jockey, I'd always be curious to know, do you feel like you're able to have like a normal father-son relationship, or do you think it's quite different from, say, some friends you may have who are not in racing, their relationships with their parents? Because obviously you're in the business with them and you're in the industry with them, and I'd imagine a lot of your time is taken up with racing and racing talk. So do you feel like that relationship is different for that reason?
Yeah, I would. We're always, like, racing is very much, it's the lifestyle, so we're nearly always working as such. And working with your family isn't always straightforward. Like, we will clash at times. But I think the longer I'm 34 now, so I'm working there. Came home from college when I was 21 or 2, so we've learned to work around each other. But David Casey is definitely brilliant. Brilliant with Willie. Willie changes his mind. He'll say one thing, do another thing, and drives me crazy. Whereas David just bats his eyelids and keeps going. But it is very much. There's a lot of work in how me and Willie interact. But we both follow Man United as well, so we can complain about that together.
Yeah, and that must be difficult as well, because you're having a terrible run of things, United.
We didn't appreciate the Roy Keane, Dennis Irwin years, but I'm starting to appreciate them now, all right. Yeah.
Well, maybe if you'd got through them trials a bit better and you'd be midfield now, they wouldn't be having the problems that they're having now.
Yeah, no, but I try to get over Old Trafford once or twice a year, and pick the race, the matches we might win. So we've been lucky recently.
Has Willie been over to Old Trafford as well?
Not in a long time. He was over at Brighton. Tony Bloom brought him over to a Brighton match when they beat Man United, actually.
Lovely.
So Tony shows that one well. But Willie would watch most of the matches, yeah. At home.
So you've got something else to talk about outside of racing as well, which always helps, I'd imagine.
Yeah.
Okay. And then more about the sort of day-to-day, because you mentioned Willie changed his mind quite a bit, and you mentioned earlier about him giving jockeys bollockins, which I can't picture in my mind, because he always seems so calm and serene in public. What's a Willie Mullins bollocken like?
Bollocking could be the wrong word, because it's actually the less he says, the more trouble you're in. We might just say one line or 2 line, or but sometimes he actually doesn't even. There was once when I was 18, I was riding in the bumper in Galway, and I'd gone racing with Willie, and I was riding. My mother owned the horse, and I missed the start, ran bad, came back in, he wasn't there. Grand went, got a shower, rang him. I said, "Are you in the car park?" He says, "No, I'm passing after. I left after the furlong, so we had no chance from there." I said, "Well, how will I get home?" He said, "Go home with the lorry." So I went out to the stable yard. The lorry's full, so I had to go travel from Galway about 3 hours in the back of the lorry with all the horses. And I haven't gone racing with Willie ever since, to be honest.
Really?
That was a life lesson. Never go racing with the trainer. Yeah.
Fair enough. And then day to day, do you feel very involved in the sort of training, or are you having a big input in the day to day sort of running of the yard, or is it sort of leaving Willie to it and you're...
No, Willie's very good at delegating. So I'm in at 7 o'clock, do the board, decide who's going to ride what, and then maybe the last 18 months or so I'm on the ground a lot more, and I'd have the lot organised, so who's going to do what, and Willie will come up, and it probably has sped things up a little bit. It works a bit quicker. Obviously the bigger decisions, Willie's making the call. But between David Casey, myself, Ruby, Dick Dowler, our head man, Willie's very good at delegating. He doesn't have to micromanage, and I think that's probably why he's able to run such a big business.
Operation. Yeah, sure. And then looking into the future, is the operation something that you want to take over someday? Yeah,
well, look, I'm the only child, and there is a bit of me that feels that to kind of be born, live and die in a very small part of Ireland is a little bit of a waste. But at the same time, I want to ride, I want to train. So there's always a grass is green on the other side a bit. But Willie's 67 or 8, I'm 34. I'd like to ride till I'm 40 or maybe a bit older. So I imagine that timeline works pretty well. But in England, trainers seem to retire. In Ireland, they seem to die. So I think my grandfather trained till he was 87. So maybe we'll keep going. But I enjoy what I'm doing at the moment. I enjoy riding. I enjoy being involved the way I am. But I would like to train at some stage in the future. Yeah.
And then when it comes to that point, if you do take over, do you think it'll be a little bit daunting? Because obviously, now looking back at all his accolades, he's achieved everything and he's been the man for so long. So is that daunting, or is it similar to when you started riding, that you feel like you're just your own man in your own right and you're going to do your own thing?
Yeah, look, I suppose Willie's been so successful, it's not even the chances of being that successful are so slim. So it's not even like he should be. So no, I don't think, sitting here now, being 7, 8, 10 years away from it, I don't think that's a huge worry. I think there's a system, there's a routine, and obviously I've been involved in it for a period of time. I think I can definitely do it to a level that I'd be very happy with. I think what Willie's done, I don't know will anyone ever do it again. People always do, I suppose, at some stage, but it's so far ahead of everything that it's nearly...
It's unrealistic.
Unrealistic, yeah. It'd be different if he was actually slightly less successful. Even. I don't know if that makes sense, but yeah.
And then, without wanting to get you in trouble, in case he's watching, is there something that you look at now that you think, if I was to take over tomorrow, I'd change that, or there's a system that I'd try and do better? Is there something you've got in your mind that you think, I'd like to do this differently?
It's hard. Obviously, you don't want to reinvent the wheel. Emmett has been very good. Emmett's changed little things. He has the same system routine, but he's changed little things here and there. He feeds them, gives them a night feed at 9 o'clock or something, and has other stuff as well. But I suppose from a jockey's point of view, we do very little schooling. I'd like to have an indoor ring. When I worked with Guillaume McCare, he had this loose school ring, and Henry the Bromhead has a loose school as well, and that's something I think we could do, to maybe have the horses jumping slightly better, but then they win plenty of races.
Yeah, it doesn't really seem like an issue as of now.
Yeah.
And then, so Cheltenham leading up, we've got to talk about Cheltenham. What's your, again, you've got a unique perspective that you can see sort of both sides of the coin. As a jockey and as a sort of a trainer, assistant trainer, what's your preparation like for Cheltenham? Is it a big, massive be-all and end-all and this is hyper-focused? Or is it just kind of another year and you're going through the same routines?
It's funny, for us now, we've got used to having a big team with lots of fancied horses going over. So, like, there's not that unusual pressure or anything. It is kind of like, this is what we do, this is how we do it. We have the system, we have the routine. And, and touch wood, everything is going right. I suppose it's when things start going wrong, maybe, that it becomes pressurised. But from a training point of view, we do what we do. For me, as a riding point of view, the weights in Cheltenham are slightly lighter, so I'm going to ride probably in a good few professional races. So I would change my diet a bit. I'd normally sit at 11.5 stone, which for an amateur, I'm very comfortable with that. An Irish amateur, that's more than fine. For Cheltenham, I'd like to actually be 2 or 3 pounds lighter, not dehydrated, like lose that. So I'd have a slightly more strict diet, but I mean it's not a huge push either.
Yeah, and I imagine your diet's fairly strict anyway. So does it affect your mood leading in Cheltenham having that stricter diet?
Definitely. When you're, you know yourself, when you're doing a diet, you do a bit less energy, a bit less time for things going wrong. But like I said, I'm not trying to lose 7 pounds. It's 2 or 3, so it's not a major, compared to what other people are doing. It's not a major thing.
And we've talked about Cheltenham's success and the feeling coming with that big Cheltenham winner. But let's talk a little about the fails, the ones that go wrong, the bad Cheltenham days. I'd imagine, one, because there's so much sort of public pressure, but they must feel surely a lot worse than your average bad day, say at like Gorham Park or wherever else. Does a bad day at Cheltenham really feel like a bad day?
Yeah, the only good thing, lucky for us, is you generally you're going to have another ride or another, something else. And if you can get one winner at Cheltenham, I've had, let's say the 2 worst days at Cheltenham for me were Duvan falling, Champion Chase, and then getting seated on Cheltenham Special. Both weeks I happened to have a winner that week, and that changes the whole thing. Whereas if you didn't have a winner, and that's your abiding memory, and you get better. The more you experience those bad days, the better you are at trying to deal with them. Like I remember when I started riding when I was a teenager, if I gave one a bad ride or got beaten one I should have won on, like I'd make myself in a bad form for 2 or 3 days. Like I'd feel you have to be in bad form for 2 or 3 days, and I think probably that helped me get better. I do think you need that. You can't just move when you're starting off. You can't move. You shouldn't be moving on straight away. But obviously, as you get older, you learn how to compartmentalize it. Yeah. So, and stick it in the box and look at it. Look at the replay. Right. Did that go wrong? Did I do something wrong, or was it just one of those things? And you get to move on. But again, Cheltenham is such a bubble because things move quickly. There's another race, there's another day, and then even on Friday you go home. We race on the Saturday and the Sunday, so you have to. You can't carry around with you forever, like.
Yeah. What I want to know about as well is more specific incidents, because thankfully I never rode over jumps, and I don't think I'd ever been good enough to. Did a bit of schooling when I was a kid, and that was enough for me. When you have a fall as a jump jockey, particularly at the big meetings like Cheltenham, obviously I'd imagine your first thought is, hopefully there's nothing broken, I'm fine, I'm not injured. And then what's your emotion immediately? Because I wouldn't know what that feels like.
It's funny, so like there's the 2 falls I was talking about. One was Duvan, and actually it was such a bad fall from him, I got up thinking, please don't let him be hurt. I thought he could be badly hurt, and he wasn't. And so that was an immediate relief to, and that actually overtook the disappointment from the fall in the immediate aftermath. Whereas, say, with Cheltenham Special last year or 2 years ago, I got unseated off him. So I remember they actually got me slamming my stick into the ground, and there's that frustration, thinking like, did I do something wrong? Why did I do that? Why did that happen? But again, like I was saying, just as the more it happens, the more you get over it, and you move on. But it's as long as you haven't broken anything. And I got a fall one year in the National Chase, and I got up and I was like, I think I've done my collarbone, but I was riding in the champ bumper later. So you're getting into the ambulance, and you're like, when you break something, obviously you have a certain period of time where you're still adrenaline's up and you can get away with it. So I got through the doctor and won the bumper on champagne fever, but I couldn't lift my right hand. But you should always be able to use your stick in your hand as well. So I was fine. But there's different falls and different things go wrong. But yeah, as long as you are right and the horse is all right, you live to fight another day.
That's another one that I hadn't thought about until you mentioned it there. A fairly sort of unique psychology point for jump jockeys is that they'll break something and think, oh, I still want to ride. I can't imagine that happens in any other sport. I don't fully understand why jumpy jockeys are like that. I know you don't want to miss your opportunities, and I get that, but there's sort of no real consideration for your own body and your own health, is there? Well,
look, it depends. I mean, look, if it's your arm or your collarbone, it's not your neck, your head. And concussion is something that, like I got concussed in Punchestown this year, and I don't remember riding. I rode a race afterwards, and I have no memory of 5 or 6 hours there, or more maybe, because we ended up getting brought to A&E about 12 o'clock that night because I was just repeating myself. And looking back, a few people knew that I wasn't right, but it would be kind of done thing is you'd cover for someone. But I think now with concussion, if I got another fall while I was concussed, obviously you see it in rugby now, like there's consequences to that. So I think that is something that's starting to change. But if it's a collarbone or something where you can get away with it for a big ride, you're not going to do it for small rides. But it's just a culture. We've always been told there's been hardy people gone in front of us, and we see Ruby, McCoy, so you're trying to emulate them. There is a balance to it, and I think as time goes on, it's going to come back a bit. But yeah, if you can ride, you'll ride, yeah.
Now, have you noticed a big culture change in the weighing room from, say, when you started to when you may finish? Because I think I found from when I started to when I retired, and that was only 7 years, from 2015 on, I felt like there was a massive change in how jockeys spoke to each other, how we dealt with certain scenarios. Do you feel like there's been a big change?
Yeah, I think there's probably less hard people. Maybe I think there's probably obviously society and culture is changing. I think maybe not as much as society and culture has changed, but look, there's still bust-ups, there's still flare-ups, but I don't think some of the stories you hear, like even compared to people coming in after late nights, or that kind of people used to stay down in Galway for the week and go out every night and go racing, and now that culture is gone. I think there's a lot more professionalism in it, whether that means they're better or not, I don't know. It's just a different approach. But funny, I've interviewed a few people in the last 12 months, and one of the questions I always ask is, what do you make of the weight room now? And both Dennis O'Regan and JJ Slevin said it's a much nicer place than it used to be.
Yeah, I definitely felt it was nicer from when I first started to when I finished. There was a couple, I won't name names, but a couple of senior jump jocks when I started. As you are a young lad, you make mistakes, and I was probably a little bit arrogant as well, which didn't help. But it was straight away like, oh, I'm going to kill you, what the fuck you do, and give me a bollocking. And then there was a couple, like say Paul Morenon was a great example in Northern Weighing Room, where I'd have flattened him one day around Chelmsford, like nearly put him on the floor, and he just pulled me aside and said, look, you can't do that, you don't see Ryan Moore doing that, you need to. And that had a better effect on me. I think I learned more from it, and I think it's a good thing, at least that aspect of it is a good thing, that people are, instead of just coming in roaring and shouting, just pulling aside and saying, look, this is the right way to behave and this is the right thing to do.
Yeah, I'm sure. I know that with myself, what you'd react better to, And but like I would say in a race, I could give out to someone in a race, but I would always make a point of going in afterwards and saying, look, this is why I was angry. This is and as you say, people react to that. And actually, I find you nearly become better. With sometimes people you end up having an argument on the track by chatting to them afterwards in the weight room. We actually end up being closer or being better,
have a better
friends,
relationship,
whatever.
Yeah, sure. Let's talk a little bit more about some personal stuff. One, I want to know at what point, you said you want to ride till ideally around 40. When you get to 40 and the day comes where you decide to hang up the boots, is there something left that you want to achieve that you haven't, that would get you to 40 and you'd say, oh, I'm happy with my lot now, that's enough and I've achieved something? From a riding perspective.
Look, there's lots of things I want to do. I want to try to get to 1,000 winners, but I hopefully should get to that before I'm 40. There's 3 amateur races out in the Kimure, the National Chase, the Fox Hunter. They've won 2, have been second in the Kimure. Only 2 amateurs have won all 3, so Derek O'Connor and John Oaksey, so I'd like to try win that. Had a horse going for it this year, and Danny won on him at Christmas and got £15. He's no longer qualified for Kimure. That might have also been part of the Limerick thing. And yeah, I want to ride a Grade 1 winner against the pros over jumps at Cheltenham. I've been beaten a head and a short head with Clebrave and Mellon, so that's something I'd like to do. I'm going over it this year, this April, to ride in the Maryland Hunt Cup. Never done that before. That'd be really cool. I've ridden the Pardubice the last 3 years, which is like the Czech Grand National, fallen every year. I'd like to get around that.
So it's a mental race, isn't it?
It is, but it's a great. I love that. I love different kind of jumping. I'd love to ride a winner in Autoy. I've gone there. Racing's so different there. Racing over here is quite regimented. I love going to jumps races in other countries, and I think we should be trying to support more of that. Going over to Far Hills, the American Grand National is a great day out. I recommend that to anyone. So there's a lot I still like to do. Yeah.
And then again, a little bit more personal. You mentioned earlier that it might be a bit of a shame to sort of live your life in that one little corner of Ireland in a specific industry. Do you feel like you've missed out on like normal experiences? Do you feel like you've missed out on life in general?
There's a bit of that. Now look, I've been very lucky as well. Myself and Emma, when we were 21, we took 6 weeks in the summer and we hired a car, flew to Chicago, hired a car, drove over to New York, Boston, Washington, and then drove the whole way across like Kentucky down to Memphis, over to Vegas, over to LA. So got a great, that was brilliant. And we had nothing booked. We had a flight in, flight out. We just got the map out and we'd stay in the next town, like in a motel or whatever. But yeah, I see a lot of my friends from college or school who, I've got to go and live and work in New York or London or Berlin or Melbourne. And that's something obviously I've had to miss out on. But obviously I've got a lot instead. So there's always that case of whatever, the grass is greener. But I do like to travel. Every year I like to try go somewhere, do something. And being to the Palio in Siena is brilliant. Highly recommend that to anyone. The couple of days around it, like the horses, they parade them through the streets, they get blessed in the church, and the whole community gets involved. The bull run in Pamplona that's the biggest adrenaline rush I've ever had. Waiting there in the street, and you hear the cannon go, and then you hear people start running, and then you hear the hooves of the bulls, and then they're gone by you, and that's a huge thrill. So I like trying to go out and see things. I mean, I think the world is big and life is short, so you got to do as much as you can, and that's to get out of the racing bubble every now and then is good.
Yeah, and then again, one would assume you're incredibly busy at racing. So how's your love life? Because you're not an unattractive fella, but how do you find time to have a personal sort of love life and relationships and stuff like that?
Yeah, I'm going out with a girl now, and she's actually a cattle farmer, and I hate cows. But it seems to work very well. Yeah.
I suppose being a cattle farmer, at least she's somewhat agricultural and will have a bit of an understanding of the unsociable hours.
I was over the other day and there was a difficult calving happened, so I was out once or twice for some of those difficult calvings, and it's a lot different than foaling. So I left herself and her father at it, and I went and tidied the kitchen. So it was quite a role reversal, actually. Yeah.
Good stuff. So the last couple of questions I want to leave you with. One is, would you consider yourself obsessed with racing? Is it an obsession for you?
No, not anymore. I would have in my 20s, very much so. I wouldn't have missed anything for a winner. Since I've turned 30, and since COVID, I'm much more inclined to do a bit more. Like I never used to. The last 3 years I've gone skiing for 2 or 3 days after Christmas. I would never done that in my 20s because you might get hurt. But I don't want to not ski till I'm 40. So, or I would have, birthdays or weddings or stags, I wouldn't have gone if I was going to miss a winner. Whereas now I'm very much like they would take preference. So No, I was, but I'm not anymore. No.
Is there something specifically that you miss that you regret? Because we've had jockeys on here who've missed funerals, have missed hen do's and stuff like that. Is there an occasion or something specific that you think, oh God, I was stupid, I should have gone to that?
My graduation from school. Yeah, I got a spare ride. Ruby McNamara, I couldn't do the weight in one in the stole, and the school had been very good to me, to let me out, and I got an award as well. I can't remember what it was for, but my granny went up to collect it, and I should have been there. Like the horse ran finished 5th or something. Like it was a favourite. It was for Harry Rogers. I can't remember the name of the horse, but when you're 18, it's just racing, riding. Yeah. So, but I should have respected the school more for that day. Graduation.
Yeah. And the final one, if you could go back in time and speak to young Patrick Mullins and give him a piece of advice, what would you say to him? I
think I just tell him to do what he's doing. I think I'm quite happy where how everything turned out.
Yeah, that's good. Fair play. Thanks so much for coming on. We really appreciate it. It's been an absolute pleasure, and best of luck for Cheltenham and for the future.
Great. Thanks so much.
Thanks.